Okay, so you've got a conceptual understanding of what the board does, but what about your role as an individual trustee? In this video, we explore in more detail the role you play individually and the impact that you can have on the effectiveness of the whole board. It can be difficult, particularly for those of you new to being on the board, to appreciate the scope and responsibilities of being a trustee. This video aims to give you a brief overview of your role as the trustee, and of course other videos go into deeper depth into roles and responsibilities of the board. So this video really is to set the framework for your professional development and growth. As the school's ultimate decision and governing body, the board's in a unique position to help guide the school through the inevitable challenges and to anticipate and plan for change, and in doing so, ensure that not only the current students are cared for, but also the future generations of children. While there will undoubtedly be issues and challenges that need immediate responses, much of the work you do is part of a significantly longer-term process where you may not see the full impact for many years to come. How can trustees best perform their crucial role? Other videos in this series go into detail about why trustees need to take certain approaches, as well as practical strategies to manage their time. Trustees are typically experienced and well qualified to offer guidance and expertise to the board, and so it's often tempting for trustees to want to jump in and take action to try to come up with a solution, a strategy to solve the problems that you're facing. But that's not necessarily the most effective way of going about things. Perhaps arguably the most important skill is to determine what are the most critical issues, on the one hand assessing what's important, while also considering what's urgent. Underpinning these discussions and decisions is the art of asking the right questions, so that you can be a sense maker before being a decision maker. Change happens, sometimes slowly, as schools adapt to subtle changes in demographics or society, sometimes quickly as they have to respond to COVID or other significant events. Those schools that fail to see these changes early when they start to happen are often left scrambling to manage the chaos, lurching from one decision to the next. This failure to see the shifting environment impacts schools just as it does with businesses, but the difference is that it invariably impacts the children and their education. As the term trustee implies, you're in a position of trust, and the board's responsibility is to support the long-term mission and values of the school. In that respect, the board's focus must be on the strategic rather than the operational issues as far as possible. One of the challenges, of course, is that boards and school structures are different. Whereas in some schools, trustees are elected and may be required to be a parent, in others, trustees may be recruited or co-opted from the wider community. Ideally, they're all selected because they've demonstrated a commitment to supporting the school's mission and values. As a board, it's important to keep the guiding statements in mind when making decisions to ensure that there remains alignment or congruence between the actions of the board and the school's stated objectives. This can be a delicate balance, appreciating the historical journey the school's taken up to this point, but being aware of the broader and rapidly changing environment that will impact the school in the future. Again, it's easy for trustees to become engrossed in the immediate challenges, to try to solve the problems of today. However, that's only part of your responsibility, because it's also your responsibility to remain focused on the long-term health of the school. Your fiduciary duty is to ensure that the school is financially and legally sound, so that the school can offer the best standards of education to the children enrolled now, as well as those future generations still to come. This means being alert to current trends and making plans for how the school must adapt to the continual changes in the wider world within the context of the school's history and values, so that you can make sense of the social and economic issues and ultimately help guide the school towards continued success. Now let's step back for a moment. Oftentimes, trustees are appointed or elected because of the skills or knowledge that they have. For many trustees of international schools, they have a successful career that's been a result of being good at their job and receiving additional training so that they've become specialists in their given fields. So it's quite natural when taking a position as a trustee that sometimes you may feel that there are aspects of the school's operations that you literally might believe that you can do the job better. This tends to be more prevalent in maybe the technical professions, such as finance, but it still applies in other areas, compounded by the fact that everyone has experience of schools, either from when they were a child or through their own children. But the challenge here is to recognize that your role as a trustee is a type of a leadership role, that you're responsible for the people that are responsible for the job, not the job itself. Let me say that another way. So for example, for business and finance, you're not directly responsible for the balance sheet and income statement, but you're responsible for the people that are. That's the head of school and in turn, the business manager. Now that you know more about what your role is, a few words about what your role isn't. Perhaps first is to dispel the notion that you are appointed or elected to represent a certain constituency. While your connection or interest with a particular segment of the community may seem pressing, your role as a trustee is not to advocate for that particular group, but to care for the long-term success of the school. So rather than advocate for a subset of the community, you're an advocate for the whole school. A common challenge for new trustees is that they're now seen in the community as someone with influence, and so you may be approached by a range of stakeholders with a grievance or appeal. And remember that you cannot speak for the board unless you've a specific mandate to do so. However, there are a few pragmatic guidelines that can prevent unnecessary expenditure of time, energy, and goodwill. So for example, there may be some board decisions that prove unpopular with certain stakeholder groups, but that doesn't make them wrong. If you're going to hear an appeal against your decision, think carefully before hearing this appeal unless there's actually new information that was not initially available when the decision was made. Otherwise, you open yourself to endless appeals against any and all unpopular decisions, which can literally tie you in knots. Similarly, be very, very cautious about reversing decisions made by the head of school, since this is effectively saying that you have no confidence in his or her decision, and it's obviously a slippery slope from there to a completely undermined relationship with the head. Trustees shouldn't be directing or meeting with staff or faculty except where expressly detailed in policy or agreed. As a trustee, you should direct your questions or requests through the head of school, and be alert to any person or group that's trying to bypass the head of school to get to you. Your role on the board is not to micromanage, which means that you don't give direct instructions to employees. Your work on the board, or even on the personnel committees, would look at broad issues, and you wouldn't be privy to confidential information such as individual salaries or evaluations, unless a formal grievance is being heard and where such information is really pertinent to the case. As you reflect on this new information, you might like to think about your role and your board. In recognizing that everyone on your board is different, do you see those differences as a strength that allows for informed, purposeful and healthy debate that leads to improvements? Or are there serious philosophical differences that leave you feeling the board is somewhat dysfunctional? What messages and guidance is given to the head of school? Is it clear? Or are there mixed messages and maybe confused priorities? Is the board collaborative but ultimately complacent? Or do the deliberations develop a shared vision and platform for the school improvement?